What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale, joined once again by the hashtag returning certified fantabulous, Mr. Grant Hughes, back from vacation, where I believe that he leapt over the mouth of a volcano in Hawaii, is what multiple sources have told me. So we're excited that he survived and was able to come back and podcast. You all know I've mentioned it like 2 or 3 times. Brian Toporek has been great. All our guests are always great. I have missed Grant terribly, and I think I actually only recorded 2 episodes without him, and so I missed him anyway. Grant, how the heck are you doing, man?
Just happy to be here. Happy to see your smiling face. Happy to see that we wore matching color new sicko mode shirts today. Different designs. It's like we planned it, but we didn't. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to speak with you, and I'm happy to repurpose a topic that we've already prepared for a podcast because it's a light lift, but it's a fun topic, and I'm looking forward to that too.
And it's sort of, and by the way, good plug. Go buy our merch if you want to support the show. Go buy our merch. The store link is in the podcast and YouTube description. Grant has on the Proud Sicko with a 6-space design on the back. I have the Sicko Mode shirt. I'm gonna have to order more. I keep wearing the same like 1 or 2 things, and people are gonna think, "Does it go do laundry?" I'm waiting for those in the comments. So yes, support the show. Go buy our merch. We're going to be talking about, and this sort of will hold us over until Grant and I get to our over-unders. We're going to put out, it'll be a 2-part thing of, will every team in the NBA be better or worse relative to just how many games they won last year? So we're not getting into over-unders or even win predictions. We're looking at last year's number, and we know progress isn't linear, but for the purposes of this podcast, Grant, progress must be binary. You're either better or you're worse. And so we will, as I think is our, do you have any idea why this is, that we just, whenever we break up these conference podcasts, that we always just do the Western Conference first?
West Coast bias, I guess, from me. I don't know. Am I like incepting you?
I didn't even ask you though. I just like, that's the one that I have pulled up first, and I live on the East Coast.
Well, we didn't discuss what order we were going to do these in, but I think, as I recall, I have all the West teams, right? And you have all the East teams that did the write-ups for. Is that how it went?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. No, I don't know. I definitely I think it is just by virtue of growing up in California, I saw Western Conference teams more, and the East just feels like at a slight remove for me. Like even the big time East teams are just like, well, that's I don't know what it is. It's kind of like, it works that way for me for baseball too, just because I grew up a Giants fan, and National League teams are just like, I know those teams, and the American League, which is stupid because it's not geographically split. It makes less sense than East and West in basketball, but I don't know. So do you have the same feeling about Eastern Conference teams since you grew up on the other side of the country?
No. I don't know if it's just because of the hours I've kept because of what we do, and maybe because by the time I'm wrapping up a lot of the work I'm doing, the West Coast games are starting, and those are the ones that I predominantly don't have to go back and rewatch or watch film on because my attention is more locked in. And it's also just the West has been for decades better,
right?
That's in part some than the East.
Also, I posit that you are a Californian at heart. You just don't know it. I think maybe that's what it is.
Look, San Diego is one of my favorite places in the world. And so if I could convince my wife to move out there, and it also wasn't crazy expensive, although Long Island's not exactly cheap either. I would love to live in San Diego.
That might be the farthest place in the lower 48 states that you could move from where you currently live. In terms of there's not a lot of more distance.
Where I currently live isn't special aside from it being wildly expensive. And I still, to this day, after all these years of living here, basically my entire life, have no idea what the draw is and why it says it, just because it's we're an hour away from the Hamptons and an hour and a half train ride from the city. And so it's just costs a shit ton to live here. I have no idea, but I don't understand. I'm sure they're very nice people that live here, including myself and my wife. But Long Island, New York is, anyone listening from Long Island, New York, if you're offended by this, I don't the news to me. It's a running joke, of how much of a, specifically Suffolk County too. It's just they make fun of Ronkonkoma is sort of the train line, and that's where I actually grew up. So I don't know why it's so expensive here. It just is.
There's you guys have some wild ass names for places and cities out there. Why? Well, Ronkonkoma is, I don't know. Maybe
Ronkonkoma.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to try again. I'm not going to get it. I don't know where do all those come from? This is now a like etymology podcast. I'm asking you where the words come from that describe your towns.
I think it's cute that you think I care enough to know the genesis of these names. I do think that they are rooted in some sort of Native American heritage,
That's
far
what I
as I
thought.
know. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that for sure. There is a movie coming out though about Lake Ronkonkoma because there's a legend about star-crossed lovers basically, and their families didn't want them. It's like a Romeo and Juliet type thing, and they either took their own life or the woman only took hers, and she drowned in the lake. And so the legend has been that there's no bottom to the lake, and that she claims one drowning every year. And there's been like 160 reported and confirmed drownings in Lake Ronkonkoma since the 1800s. So there's probably a movie coming out about it.
Is it like the same day? Like someone drowns on the same day every year? Because just don't go to the lake that day. Seems like a pretty easy fix.
Just don't. First of all, the lake is disgusting. Just don't swim in the lake.
Don't go at all.
Yeah, there's like cans and sludge in there. Like I don't. It's even just like, oh, you're so close to the Hamptons here, and it's like the water is brown. People, it's like, what are we doing? Anyway,
how do we transition from this to?
I have no idea, but Western Conference stuff, which I feel like it's a good time to. Let's throw up so we'll do the West teams, and just as a reminder, we're trying to decide whether they'll be better or worse relative to how many wins they had last season. Okay, here we go. For those watching, it's on the screen, so you could look at. I was wondering, Grant, since they're on the screen and easy for us to keep track of, do we want to draft and pick which teams we go to just completely out of order?
Oh, I don't know. I was thinking too, we could like go in order of like how confident we are, but I don't have official rankings for that. So yeah, I don't know. Let's just go.
I say we pick random. What's the team you want to talk, and we'll just go that way.
Well, we're gonna forget this way. This is a recipe.
It's on the screen. Disaster. You'll be able to see which. I'm gonna put something up that says better or worse, and you'll be able to see which teams we haven't done.
All right, fine. Let's do. I really want to start with Dallas because I like to keep things in order. You're gonna push me here. Okay, I want to start. Let's start here because this is the team that I have the most difficulty deciding. I flip-flopped, but twice now since I wrote this up for BR. And that's the Phoenix Suns. So let's do Phoenix here. Initially, so they won 49 games a year ago. Initially, I was really convinced that they were going to be worse than that. The logic just being, I don't think Kevin Durant has another 75 all NBA level games in him, which the Suns got from him last year. Just all the basic Suns stuff. They're top heavy. They're inflexible. Bradley Beal is a pretty big disappointment. All the second apron stuff, their options are limited. All of their best players have health questions. Is Yusuf Nurkic going to be as good somehow as he seemed to be on defense last year and allow them to finish 12th in defensive efficiency? So I had them worse. And then Tyus Jones happens. And then I remember that they have Monte Morris and Mason Plumlee. So the rotation looks a little better. And certainly the point guard spot looks better. And then I was like, okay, maybe better because 49 is not that many. So I could be persuaded to go either way. I would like your deciding vote if you have a strong feeling. If not, I think I know where I'm leaning. But what is your sense of the Suns before I definitively say better or worse?
So wait, you're saying whatever I say, you're just going to adopt?
I'm not promising that. I would just
I'm about to throw it on the screen.
I
was just making sure. I wanted to know how much power I had here.
You have a decent amount of power here.
So I think they're going to be better.
Okay.
The fact that they won 49 games, given all that happened last year, and I know that the big three, they did play together, but the stop and start availability of Bradley Beal to begin the year certainly didn't help things. The fact that they were so good on defense without getting super lucky on opponent shooting is just, they could be better on that end with a full year of Royce O'Neal. And you brought back Josh Okogie. Now, however, I've called it they've exacerbated their amount of non-wings by bringing in Tyus Jones. But one of our biggest gripes with them was the turnovers. Even with Devin Booker running point guard, there were just minutes where it wasn't clicking. Now, maybe just extra time improves that, but you bring in Tyus Jones, who is, by the way, one of only just two players to have 3 seasons with an assist rate above 25 and a turnover rate below 9. The other player, by the way, Grant, is Michael Jordan. Pretty good company to keep. You're going to have some more offensive organization. And I think that's a big deal in part because of the concern that you just outlaid with Kevin Durant. This will make it easier if he has to miss time, but it also makes it, or when he's on the bench, of course, but it also makes it easier on Kevin Durant because Tyus Jones is so good at getting into the lane. He's pretty quick at getting off the ball. And we saw KD specifically struggle with how defenses were going after him. And he's just not built that way to beat double teams the way he was a half decade ago or so. And so to bring in another ball handler, game manager, I think that ends up making them better. And I think you could also just point to it, right? KD might play less. Bradley Beal probably plays more. And he, to his credit, I think people have like made Bradley Beal his no trade clause where it's like, this dude sucks because he has a no trade clause. It's no, the no trade clause is very restrictive for his team and it's put the Suns in a tough spot, but he's still a good player. And I thought he did a good job of trying to adapt last year. My main concern with them is I know they were just 12th in defense, but they're starting Tyus, which means that Beal or Devin Booker is just their primary wing checker to begin games. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to close, because if you're Tyus, do you go to Phoenix on the minimum? If you're like, oh, you'll start, but we might just yank you 2 minutes in, or you're not going to close games.
I'm going to go better. I think you've sold me. The other thing is they had the point differential of a team that should have won like 50 just on cleaning the glass, 50.6. So there's a little wiggle room if you were to assume they like actually aren't any better. I think there's just the depth is part of it. I guess this is an argument that the improved depth, the presence of more than one point guard, offsets like there's like you got to concede though. There's real like the bottom falls out risk with this team if like one or two of their relatively injury prone best players are down at the same time. But I guess so high variance for sure, but 49 is just not that high. So I guess we'll go better for them.
Is there like they also do have, and they can still trade their 2031 first round pick is what I'm getting at. And they have salaries in Josh Okogie, even Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, if they're willing to move him. They could do like, if the 2031 pick is on the table, I'm using this as an example. Do you know who would be perfect for this team? Tari Eason. And so if you're Houston and you've already started getting in the business of Suns picks, why not just get that 2031 first round pick, send out Tari Eason, take back whatever you need to do. Would you do that if you're Phoenix? Like, is Tari Eason a good enough player to say I'm punting on my draft 7 years from now?
If I'm Phoenix, I probably already tried to trade that pick. Like, I think they're just like, if I'm pretending I'm
like, who is the worst type of player that you would? I proposed this to somebody and they said, well, could Houston give up Cam Whitmore as well? And I was like, salary wise, yeah, they could make it work, but Cam Whitmore and Tari Eason for just a 2031 first round pick, I don't think I'm doing it if I'm Houston.
Yeah, I think in a vacuum of I don't know, are we talking unprotected? Whatever. A first round pick of any type is kind of a lot for Tari Eason. I really like Tari Eason. I just wrote about him today because he had kind of a lost season. But like defensively, that guy is just a game wrecker, and he really is the type of guy you would want playing with, scoring stars, which is what Phoenix traffics in. I don't know. I don't know who the best player is that pick could get, but like that's the fit at least would make a lot of sense if Eason could be healthier than he was a year ago. All right, so we're bullish on the Suns, I guess, despite me having a lot of reservations.
I'm going to draft one now. Are you ready?
Oh, go ahead.
We have not talked about this team that much. The Portland Trailblazers, 21 wins last year, Grant. And so I guess this is the best way. I'm going to draft teams with the intention of throwing it to you. 21 wins. Are you calling them better or worse?
I think they're going to be worse. And that it gives me a little bit of pause because 21 wins is like that's not a lot of wins. We do see teams in the teens pretty much every year though. And a lot of it is just sort of the context of the West for me, just because there's probably only going to be at most 2 Western Conference teams that are not interested in winning. The Blazers will be one of them. I think Utah's the other, but this marketing deal, I don't know, maybe not, or maybe it'll be harder. So it's the context, and it's the idea that like if the guys that they should want to play actually play more, which is to say like Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, I guess Simons, Toumani Camara, just their younger guys, they should probably be bad just because that's just what happens when you give a ton of minutes to young players. And then there's also like, if you're talking about, well, how might the roster change? they have veterans that they can and should be trying to trade for future assets. So like those are kind of that's the 3-pronged kind of process that gets me to worse, even though 21 wins is like, I mean, you could accidentally win 22 games. It seems like in most years. I just think Portland the arrow is aiming down for Portland. And I think they're okay with that.
I would agree with you. That's why I put it up on the screen. We caught, not you and I, but Esparahini and I, when we were talking about the Blazers' direction, we both expressed confusion over it, and we caught a lot of shit. I'm still somewhat confused over it. I don't understand what Chauncey Billups' guiding principles as head coach is just yet. How much of that is related to, okay, well, look at when he took over, what they were trying to do versus last year when they dealt with all these injuries. What I will say is, as currently constructed, this team should probably be better. And I was not a Donovan Clingan guy coming out of the draft, but he proved to be, when I watched him in Summer League, he did a lot of the I am huge and I know it stuff on defense really well. We saw him take some threes. And so they have a trillion bigs, but like if they're just willing to play Donovan Clingan, there's a chance their defense just gets better by that. Denny Avdia makes their defense better. Jeremy Grant, pretty good defender still. They have Tamani Kamara. This is a team that Robert Williams III, if he's healthy, this is a team, if they're not making massive moves, I feel like they could be sneaky good on defense. Now, this is all to say, and I hope Blazers fans don't take this as an insult. You mentioned it. They want to be bad. They are the only team right now in the Western Conference that is very clearly not interested in winning next season. And so whether it's trading players or whether it's shutting them down, they are going to be bad. I don't know if I'm prepared to say, like, they might win 20 games instead of 21. I think they'll end up in the teens just because I firmly believe maybe you could pencil Utah into this sort of umbrella too, but these other teams are either going to be trying to win or maybe talented enough to stumble into wins unless catastrophic injuries happen. The Blazers, yeah, on paper, they're probably good enough to stumble into more wins than they want, but I don't think they're going to let them. I'm not saying they're going to shut down guys, but you're going to see some lineups get rolled out there where it's, oh, maybe Scoot isn't starting, but he's closing games for us when there might just be a better veteran lineup to run out there. So that's why I think they'll finish with fewer than 21 wins next season. That doesn't mean that their future will probably be better off for it though. But this team is, when you look at them and the Hornets, those are the teams that are on paper where it's, well, everyone's just going to assume that they suck. And it's like, if they're just healthy and keep this together, they could probably win more games than you're expecting. But just relative to the hellfire that is the Western Conference, I'm going to go with fewer than 21 wins.
Yeah, I think that has to be right. I mean, I don't know. You look at the roster and it's hard to say like, oh, they definitely want to lose. What I do feel confident in saying is they should want to lose. And it has more to do with just because like, what does going for it, whatever that means, get them, right? Like you're not finishing above more than like one team or two, maybe if something goes totally sideways for one of the top 13 teams in the West.
Right.
If Memphis has if another team goes, even Memphis won 27 last year. Like this team it's like the play-in is like out of the question. And like, even that is something I think we agree, like teams probably shouldn't be gunning for the play-in generally. So yeah, they cannot, if they are trying to do anything but just play all the young guys and let whatever happens happen, it feels like a pretty big mistake to me.
I don't think that we mentioned the trillion centers, so there's weirdness there, but they don't have anyone on this roster, maybe Jeremy Grant because of his pay grade, that they can't just say, well, you're not guaranteed minutes. There's no one with sort of that cachet to where if you don't play them, it's going to be a big deal. And so I think that'll allow them to do, if they don't want to, maybe if the offers for Grant aren't out there, or they're not good offers for RW3, and they're certainly not going to be good offers for Ayton, I would imagine, they could just not play those guys as many minutes without really like any sweat off. Again, Grant might be the one where you look at and say, is there any issue there? But he's sort of the player where he's good and he will be good on a bad team, but he's not like good enough to ruin your tank, or not your tank, but your organic rebuild, whatever you want to call it. And so I would say, just because I'm already open to the idea that I missed on Donovan Clingan in the draft, that I feel better about Portland's future, even though I think that they're going to win fewer games next season.
Yeah, I could get behind that. All right, I want to nominate the other really difficult one for me in the West, and that's the Sacramento Kings. So
I love how we're just going in. We're not going in alphabetical order.
Oh, I didn't even mean to do that.
Right.
See, you can't stop me from trying to be organized, even accidentally. So I think we are pretty much of the same mind about the main offseason decision, which was the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade, uh, net talent upgrade, potential for the whole to be less than the sum of the parts because you have a lot of overlapping skills, a lot of primary offensive players that are not very valuable off the ball. So how do you make that work between him, Sabonis, Fox, Malik Monk? Not that all those guys are valueless off the ball, but generally speaking, they're best with it.
Mhm.
I think the defense should be worse with DeRozan.
I already hear the comments in the YouTube I'm not even trolling Kings fans here, but there's a lot of them that seem to believe that DeMar DeRozan is going to be more valuable on defense than Harrison Barnes. And I don't think Harrison Barnes was good on defense last year.
Yeah.
I think what happened, like if you look at what DeMar DeRozan needed to do in Chicago and who DeMar DeRozan got to play with in a lot of his minutes versus who Harrison Barnes was covering last year, you can't even ask DeMar DeRozan to try doing that. At least Harrison Barnes was okay. He kind of has like the archetype of has to do that. And so I'm only interjecting because a lot of Kings fans seem to just think that DeMar DeRozan is the more valuable defensive player. And I just think that's not reading enough into the context of where he was and how he was used in Chicago.
I guess I could be convinced that DeRozan and Barnes are similar defensively or like close enough that it might not be a huge drop off. I still think if I had to choose, will the defense be better or worse? Just the personnel suggests it should be worse. Maybe Keon Ellis plays more, offsets that, but which of the offensive weapons is not playing if he's out there? You know that. So the other thing for me, and this is really, I'm gonna go worse because they won 46 games a year ago. We should probably lead with that. I'm going worse for all those reasons, combined with the fact that I think a couple teams that finished below the Kings, Houston, San Antonio, could threaten to get up into that range. And the fact that clutch performance was a huge driver of the Kings exceeding their point differential, which was that of like a 42 win team. So we're talking really about, unless you believe that clutch luck carries over, which given some of the guys on the Kings roster, like Fox and DeRozan, they have clutch players or guys that have historically been clutch. We're knocking 4 wins off right there. Like they were not really a 46 win team if you put any stock in point differential, which I think we both do. I certainly do. So the bar is actually lower. And so they could be roughly the same team as last year, or even a little better in terms of, the point differential and still win 44 or whatever and finish worse. So this was a hard one for all the reasons I've stated. Do you have anything to add, or are we just like too in lockstep on this?
Oh, I actually disagree. I think they're going to be better.
Okay, great.
So I look at and I had a conversation with Greg Wissinger on the side about he mentioned how their top end defensive units were faring by the end of last season. What I doubt there is I think it's actually harder if we're assuming the guys that they want to play the most, that it's going to be harder for them to get to elite defensive units. However, their issue from my end was offense last year. They were 14th in points scored per possession, which for a team built around De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis is just not even close to good enough. And so you start to dig into it. And I agree with you that everyone is kind of more comfortable on the ball. But if you look, of all the rotation players on the Kings last year, every single one of the regular rotation players, De'Aaron Fox was the only player who scored a majority of his buckets unassisted. And so now you bring in DeRozan, because look, that's not Malik Monk's game. Sabonis is more of a driver of playmaking than he is of looking for his own offense. Now you bring in DeRozan, you have that other outside-in creator. You're getting another, and this is why, so I'm more concerned about the defense because I think DeMar DeRozan is going to help the offense that much. And he's shown he'll up his 3-point volume. Will he hit them is a different story. Sabonis shot the 3-ball well last year, just not in higher volume. Is there wiggle room there? Do you look at staggering them? And that's what's also interesting about this team. Their staggered star minutes were pretty bad last year when you look at just Sabonis. And now those, I would think, they get strengthened to where you could surround just Sabonis and DeRozan with a bunch of shooters and make it work that way, or you could stagger those two. They have all these different options of how they could stagger their best players, which I think you just get 48 more complete minutes of basketball. And I think I'm ultimately optimistic on the defensive end for 3 reasons. You mentioned Keon Ellis already. I think he's really good, especially when he's going to get to go, if he's going up against like smaller, twitchier advantage creators. I think, 2, Keegan Murray is one of the most underrated defenders in basketball to me right now. Everything from his one-on-one stuff to just like kind of as a help guy around the basket. He was top 30 in shots contested at the rim last year. I know that's kind of a function of, well, Sabonis is your center, but like that's fucking wild. And third, this is a team that is going to make a move. I don't know if it's going to be how big it is, but I think that this is like, I've said the Cavs, I would also say the Kings, like that's a Dorian Finney-Smith team. And given that, if you're able to get that level of player by the trade deadline, given the defensive improvement that Fox has shown, given the off-ball improvement Fox has shown basically since Sabonis' arrival, I think this is, I don't want to say a sleeping giant, but this feels like a 47, 48, 49 win team to me, even in the current West landscape. But finally, I'll say this very quickly. I think you are right to say that they could wind up winning 44, 45 games. And that's not necessarily, it could be an indictment on what they became, but it might just say more about the West than, whoa, this team got worse.
Yeah, no, I'm receptive to all that. I think I should have mentioned Murray. And I do think the case you'd make is like, well, Murray, whether it's good or bad for his long-term development, slips down the offensive pecking order. But that means like, well, he's got more juice to just defend the best guy all the time. And that's helpful for their defense. I think ultimately, the two things I'll say, one, I would have done the DeRozan trade, even though I have so many reservations about it. And two, if I could have picked instead of better or worse, same, I think I would have for this team more readily than any other. So I still guess like historically, I just have to underrate the Kings because that's kind of my brand. And so I'm sticking with it. You're all good arguments. I think this will be one to watch for sure. Cause I don't believe in the theory of the team, I guess, as much as you do. And maybe that's what it comes down to.
They are probably one of the more polarizing teams in the league, right?
I mean, I guess, I don't know. Like, don't you think that most people would say they're going to be about the same? Maybe just the loud voices are on the extremes that we're exposed to. I don't know.
So I should yell into the microphone that they're going to be better, and that'll.
And I should yell they're going to be worse, but I don't really feel super strongly. All right, you nominate somebody, not the Spurs.
I'm going to go out of order from the bottom row here for anyone watching on YouTube. I apologize in advance. Grant, I feel like we should do. No, we're going to do the Pelicans. Okay. I don't know how to feel about this team. And we all know that I am notoriously like sniffing everything that's coming out of New Orleans, throwing it right up my nose. I think Zion Williamson at peak is one of the 10 best players in the NBA. Is he going to be healthy enough to do that? I love the DeJounte Murray acquisition. I don't understand what's going on at center right now, where I guess it's Zion and Daniel Tice and Yves Missi. And there's a move to be made there. And look, condolences to Pelicans fans. You now can't trade for Jared Allen until basically around the trade deadline is when he'll be trade eligible again. So there's still hope it could happen this year, but it's not happening before the season. I just look at them and I like so many of their players individually. And that includes, I like Brandon Ingram. I think he's a good basketball player. But like, if we're going to go through another season of he is not upping his 3-point volume and he's dribbling out of open threes or something, you're going to have a real problem because you've now added someone else into the fold in DeJounte Murray, who has been willing to up his 3-point volume, but you need to put the ball in his hands. So Brandon Ingram, even if you're going to stagger aggressively, like Brandon Ingram needs to like do more as a complementary asset, or they need to find a move for him. And my concern here is, and I should have mentioned, they're working off a baseline from last season with a 49 wins they had. Yep. So like almost 50. It's like, there's not, if you want them to be better, like there's like, they have to clear the 50 win, but that's not going to be easy in this West. I'm kind of leaning worse until we figure out the Brandon Ingram of it all, the center of it all. And just like the track record suggests that even if Zion Williamson does everything right, come in shape, get the diet down, play his ass off on defense, his body's just going to betray him because life is unfair. Like he's just going to be in the middle of a generational performance against the Lakers and the rug's going to be ripped out from underneath him. I don't like saying this just because I love the Zion and DeJounte Murray, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones dynamic. It's like everything else after that. And finally, even if you believe they're going to improve the team, anything they do almost has to be massive because it's like, they gave up their kind of two of their smaller or medium-sized salary matching chips to get DeJounte Murray and Larry Nance Jr. and Dyson Daniels. And now it's okay. Like you could still do something with Jordan Hawkins, but if you're looking at, CJ McCollum, 30+ million, Brandon Ingram, 35+ million. And so are they prepared to do something on that scale? And what is Brandon Ingram even worth? Not just in
Yeah.
an extension. What's the number that would make you resign him and give yourself some continuity, or at least know, okay, because if you let that leak into the season, that's going to be a storyline that could distract the team. And also, I was listening to the latest In the Know podcast, and I really enjoyed the episode. But Shamit Dua had, like, this is where we're at with Brandon Ingram. Is I caught shit because I can't remember what the package was, but I think New Orleans was giving up a first round pick with Brandon Ingram in addition to getting Onyeka Okongwu and DeJounte Murray in some trade I concocted. Shamit Dua had proposed, would you do Walker Kessler and John Collins for Brandon Ingram if you're the Pelicans? I think they ultimately landed up on no, but like, this is where we're at. It went from, like, you're not getting multiple first round picks for Brandon Ingram to, well, would we take this kind of salary filler guy and John Collins who stretches the floor but isn't going to do much for rim protection, he'll rebound, and then we'll take Walker Kessler, who I don't know if he's like selling children on the black market or something, but the Jazz seem to hate him. I don't know how to feel about this team.
So I think I'm surprised that I am higher on them than you are. I see them being better, and that is while acknowledging this is maybe the first time I have not just let the Zion Williamson injury / conditioning risk make me choose like the under. I think like I just am always pessimistic about that. I don't know why I'm changing my tune. I think it's just because we saw him make like what was a pretty marked conversion midway through the year last year, and maybe that's doesn't mitigate the risk of like, oh, his knee goes out or whatever. But I do think there's reason to believe he's going to be at least in better shape than in the past, and so we know what he can do when he is fit and like on the ball and is just one of the best offensive players in the world. I think the DeJounte Murray addition gives me some optimism. I think the fact that there's just so clearly a trade to be made, like the center thing, it just has to change. You've outlined like the mechanics of that are harder than ever. I just think whoever they get in there has got to be better than what they have. And that maybe that takes away from somewhere else. But like, I think Trey Murphy is going to be better. I think Herb Jones made quiet strides again last year. He's still young enough to improve. I think Jordan Hawkins is a huge weapon that like this kind of movement shooter with tons of gravity as a rookie already like gets plays run for him. I was watching film on him today because I'm a weirdo. And just like Sicko, sorry. I got to use our branding. And he's already a guy that like any screen he sets just causes chaos because you have to stay attached to him. So he has all this offensive value that I think is kind of mostly untapped. There's just ways for a lot of guys that are already on New Orleans to get better. And I think maybe it's just like, barring injury, but like, we say that for everybody, but the Zion thing is real. I think they could win 52. Like that doesn't seem crazy to me. So I'm going to go better. And I'm surprised that we're on the sides of this that we are.
I'm going to defer to you because I want them to be better. And if you told me that their starting center wasn't going to be Daniel Tice or even Zion Williamson, in the sense I don't want him playing that much center, I would go better. It's just the center thing. Like I'm open to the idea that Brandon Ingram just might take more threes. And we've seen him take more threes in the past. I honestly, someone asked me this. I don't know what the thing is. We've never heard anything about him that he's some malcontent who won't work. Like it's been quite the opposite of the stuff you hear about him. So what, like, is it something that's just psychological? The center position makes it uncomfortable, and the lack of a resolution, and also the idea that if there is going to be a resolution, it almost has to be somewhat significant. So I'm going to just go better because I'm that much of a believer in Zion Williamson. As you mentioned, Trey Murphy, like that is, you figure out a way to get him in the starting lineup. I don't care who you're bringing off the bench to do it. And if it's a matter of starting Zion at the 5, so be it then. Let's just start Trey Murphy. I think bringing CJ off the bench is kind of an easy decision. Stagger your stars, ensure they're shooting coming off the bench. Trey Murphy replaces that in the starting lineup, but whatever. What do I know? Grant, what's the next team we're going to?
All right, let's do an easy one here. Arguably the easiest on the board, so let's just knock it out. The Memphis Grizzlies. 27 wins last year. Everybody on the entire roster who mattered, other than I guess Jaren Jackson, was injured, suspended, whatever. There's just no way they don't win 20 more games than that this year, right? Like I don't know what else there is to really say. Like we've seen this team win 50 plus twice in a row when healthy. Last year was an outlier. I don't know how much more in detail we need to get. Like, G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. got all these reps that they wouldn't have otherwise because the team was so threadbare. They'll be better. They'll be helpful. Like if those are your 9th and 10th guys or whatever, you're awesome. It's just like 27. Like there's no way they win fewer than 27. So it's just, this is the easiest one on the board. They're going to be better.
Yeah, they're going to be way better. The only really matter of debate, and it's just a matter of how much better they would be, is how much are they going to lean on Zach Edey? What does that look like? And does that adversely or positively impact their ceiling? But he should help. He should, honestly, I think they might wind up being scarier just because he probably unlocks the best possible version of Jaren Jackson Jr. on defense, because he just does the rim protection and rebounding stuff. And then that just frees up Jaren Jackson Jr. to fly around like a psychopath or a sicko and really just fuck shit up for other teams. And so I don't think we need to spend more time on it. Apologies to Grizzlies fans. We did do an in-depth look at them previously, so go check out that clip, YouTube. It's also on our podcast. But it's just like they're going to win more games. Like with the theory of just John Morant, Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. destroyed opponents when they were on the court together the previous season. I thought Marcus Smart was bad last year when you look at the way he was running the offense. Maybe that was about the talent deficit around him, but you pair those four with him and Zach Edey and Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams. You already mentioned those names. Luke Kennard is back. I do worry about their shooting overall, but I think the bigger thing, and I promise I'm wrapping it up here, is you mentioned the reps Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams got. The reps that Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane got just without John Morant, I think is going to make them way better. And Desmond Bane was already tracking towards that, but Jaren Jackson Jr. basically like quadrupling his ISO frequency and like kind of not sucking in those situations. That's just going to, I think, make him a better all-around player.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy one. All right. Your turn.
My turn. Do I go easy here too? Yeah. San Antonio Spurs, Grant. Okay. Winners of, maybe it's not easy, but winners of 22 games last year, I would say they're very clearly going to be better. And I will continue to cite the stat that we cite and that everyone cites. They outscored opponents by 5.2 points per 100 possessions with Victor Wembanyama and Trey Jones on the court last year. Chris Paul is now on this team. Even if you think that Chris Paul, age 39, is not better than Trey Jones, I would argue against that. But the theory of this is you now have Victor Wembanyama probably playing every single one of his minutes next to a competent floor general. And that just drums up the ceiling on your team exponentially. The caveat might be, so even during those minutes with Trey Jones, they had a below average offense. It was in like the 43rd percentile. But like, again, just scale that. Now Trey Jones minutes is all of a sudden going up against second units again, rather than eventually, I mean, he started too late for San Antonio. I just think you say it all the time, all things are possible through Wemby. And I would say, this is the best way I would frame it, that they'll be closer to 500 than they'll be closer to 30 wins. I think that's like closer to 41 than closer to 30.
I was worried you were going to say the exact same take that I've kind of been formulating on them. I think they're more likely to 2x their win total, which would be 44 off of last year's 22, than they are to, like, I don't know, to win, certainly to win fewer games. But like, I just feel like twice as many wins is right. Like, I don't know, maybe that's too optimistic, but like a couple other things too. I don't, just to add to what you were saying, like, you're the biggest Devin Vassell supporter I know. Like, I think Devin Vassell is going to be better. It's not just Wemby that benefits from multiple capable point guards being on the roster. It's someone that, you know, can do stuff on his own, but I think still everybody benefits from like good spoon-fed looks, right? And he's not exclusive there. Like, what if Keldon Johnson gets back on the track he was 2-3 years ago? It just, like, maybe Jeremy Sohan doesn't have to play point guard anymore. That was an interesting, like, it just sort of, now it's a lot to put on Chris Paul's plate because he's at an age where it's like he might play 25 games. So I guess that's your downside. They're still not winning fewer than 22 just because Wemby is going to be an all NBA player. He's going to win defensive player of the year. He's going to put up numbers that we just haven't seen. Like, that's just a given, right? So I don't, the Chris Paul thing like puts it way over the top, but you don't even need that to say they're going to win more than 22 games. So arguably
Barnes shooting probably also helps their offense as well too. Just opening up the floor if Keldon Johnson isn't making threes.
Yep. No, they just have two more like capable, competent, professional NBA vets that Phil needs. And then they just have a guy who's got no ceiling. So I just like 22 is ridiculous.
What's more likely for them though? That Wemby is so good or they're so good that they make, I won't say a super duper blockbuster trade, but they make a trade to improve their team, like materially improve. Someone who could crack the closing lineup or the top 6 or 7 of the rotation, or they end up steering out of being too good.
I think the former's more likely just because, I mean, one, because they have enough draft assets to do it. And two, because like, I don't think they don't seem wired to me to you got Wemby. Like unless everybody's hurt and you can, be the worst team in the league and somehow get Cooper Flag out of this, like you're set. You have the foundational piece. Like we didn't even mention Stephon Castle. Like there's another high lottery guy that you got a couple now. And Vassell still has the lottery pedigree. Was he a lottery pick? Anyway, good young player pedigree. So like you don't need more, I don't think, of that kind of thing to justify it being like, oh, we're gonna win. I don't know what's the number. We're gonna win 38 games. We got to Utah Jazz this and make sure for the last 2 months of the year we just crater. Like I don't see that one.
I like that you have Wemby. That's
I could have stopped there, honestly. Like I'm just continuing to speak as all the main points have been made. Let's see. Is it my turn?
It is.
Let's see. Have we not done a row here? Okay, let's go to the top row. Let's do the Houston Rockets. Let's stay in Texas. They won. So they already have like made a rare jump in wins year over year because they went from 22 to 41 last season. They're not going to add another 19 wins, I don't think. It doesn't feel like a 60 win team to me. But I think they're going to be better. Just like pick your breakout guy. Like there's 17 of them on this roster. And that's exclusive of guys like Alperen Sengun, who still could have another level to his game, fringe all-star. Jalen Green, I don't know, like they don't need him to break out to be better, but if he's anything close to that closing run, then great. Amen Thompson, I think I'm super high on him still. Cam Whitmore is a bucket. You get Tari Eason back. He barely played last year. Reed Shepherd looks like the best rookie I saw in summer league. So
I'm kind of wondering why he wasn't. I'm still going in the bag for Cody Williams, who finished atop my draft board. But watching Reed Shepherd, I was just like, why wasn't he atop everybody's draft board?
His shit is going to work. It's just going to work. Like, I think that was the concern. It's like a guy that looks like that with these measurables, like who's good that is that way. And it's like, well, he's an awesome shooter and he works hard on defense. He's really smart and he makes all the floaters. So
yeah, I mean, like his just the mid-range game, just like the off the dribble jumpers from there, it's going to keep defenses on tilt and he'll open the floor away from the ball. I am surprised. I think I'm going better as well. You're more confident, it sounds like, than I am, because they're still in this quasi development phase when you just look at all the like prospects they're going to lean on. But is there a single, I guess you could maybe make the case for Jalen Green, but he seems more lateral. Just like there's no one on this roster who factors in the rotation that's on the downside where it's like, oh, their stock is like Dylan Brooks's needle is pointed upward after last year.
Yeah, no, and I think I even mentioned Jabari Smith Jr., who I think made real strides last year, shot 36% from three. Like you can use him as a small ball center against. It's all these guys. Like if there's a problem here, it's that they have too many of these guys. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, I guess we make a consolidation trade for a win now player, like using two of our young guys that just can't get minutes. Like it's just hard for me to see this going badly. And I also think finally that like, I think Ime Udoka just imparts like a fucking seriousness to every team that he coaches. And the Rockets just like they're not messing around. Like they're going to try to win all the time. And like, they have guys that operate that way, like Brooks, like Fred VanVleet, like Sengun, who's super competitive. Like they just 41 win. Like they're not a 500 team. I just think they're bound to be better than that because of the personnel and just how they sort of seem to be wired.
Well, the pathway for them to be worse, though, beyond injury, of course, would just be if Ime Udoka or the organization in general is more concerned about, well, we're going to like cap minutes distribution to try and fit in all these guys. Mm-hmm. And we want to prioritize the development of, let's say, Amen Thompson over giving minutes to Fred VanVleet or Dylan Brooks and decisions of that nature. Yeah. The other thing they could do, I don't think they will, but like they have this cap space plan in 2025 where it's out there. I don't know if they're planning on going free agency hunting so much as we want that flexibility for a trade. Do they view any of their good players now as more valuable to just get off the books and get picks for, and then bring those into the offseason? I don't see an instance where, like I said, if you get bowled over by if you get a 2031 first round picks from Phoenix and now you can own their draft in 27, 29 and 2031, give up Tari Eason so that you can just pencil in Devin Booker by probably like the year 2026 or 27 into a Rockets jersey. So, but even like that, it's like they're not going to move Alperen Sengun. I'd be floored. And if they do move him, it's probably because they got a King's ransom or something went terribly wrong there. It's harder for me just because they have so many. The West is so good and so many players are just unfinished in Houston. But I don't know how you look at this team after what they did defensively. Now look at how they should get improvement offensively, specifically from Jabari Smith Jr. Keep going to go on the way up. Now you add Reed Shepherd. Amen Thompson will get better. I can't bring myself to say worse, even though I think, and this could be the case for every team, is the West is the West is the West. And so if you're not sort of this entrenched inner circle contender, it could be a little bit, there's probably more of the floor could fall out from beneath you.
See, I just think that like the West is the West argument applies. It applies to everybody, but to me, it applies more to a team like the Kings than the Rockets, just because every single guy, maybe other than Van Vliet, I guess, because small guards don't age well, every single guy that matters should be better. And the last thing, they were by point differential a 46 win team last year. The difference between their actual wins and what their point differential said they should have won was the highest in the league. So like they're already better. They just didn't show it last year. And unless you think the Thompsons and Smiths and whoever else of the world are going to get worse, which like, why would they? Like, man, I don't know. I'm talking myself into some real irrational opinions on the Rockets, but I'll just leave it at saying I think they're better than 41 wins.
It is my turn. And let's go to the Los Angeles Lakers. They won 47 games last year. They have done, save for hiring JJ Redick and drafting Dalton Connect, absolutely nothing.
Zippo
this offseason. Just, I mean, obviously their financial situation is restrictive, but it's not impossible to navigate. And they're not a second apron team. So you could have aggregated salaries in a trade as long as you're not taking back more money. You're taking back the same or less money. Here's the other thing. I'm leaning towards worse unless they do something. All of these takes are subject to change before opening night. But the thing that's really driving it for me, Grant, Anthony Davis and LeBron James played 3,615 possessions together last season. You're really going to, and the Lakers were plus 4.5 in those minutes. That's respectable. You're going to tell me that they're going to get that much joint time from LeBron and Anthony Davis again? LeBron, who's going to be in his age 40 season, Anthony Davis, who historically is always one injury away from being 2 injuries away from returning. Like, he's always on the floor. He's like, I mean, literally on the floor. It seems like every other play when he's actually like in the rotation. I think I don't know if the Lakers are doing it this way, or it's like, oh, we already used up like our best availability season from LeBron and AD. We might as well just stay the same and ride this out. I also don't know what avenues were open to them. Clearly they weren't going to get a Larry Markkinen before he signed his Utah extension. They weren't Trae Young. It doesn't look like he was ever available, but like they probably could have beaten the Pelicans offer for DeJounte Murray. I don't know if Atlanta just maybe valued Dyson Daniels more, but like this is a team that somehow, some way should have been more invested in getting better.
Yeah.
And you have to, when we're naming all these other teams that are going to get better, the Suns, the Spurs, the Rockets, the Pelicans, apparently, the Grizzlies, how are the Lakers supposed to be? What is the pathway to this Lakers team as it currently sits, winning even as many games as they did last season?
You gave the possession total for AD and LeBron. I always cite the games, 147 combined. 76 games for Anthony Davis were a career high. 71 for James was the most since 17-18. It's not going to happen again. That's what it is. And had they supplemented the roster beyond the move, I was going to say moves, but beyond the move you mentioned, which is drafting Dalton Connect, like losing, like it's a problem when you got to figure out how to fill Taurean Prince's minutes. Like that's not ideal if you're trying to get better. So I just, and like put the games played for the 2 stars aside, just like general age, like LeBron, it's coming slowly, but like he's just not going to be the same. Anthony Davis might not.
I won't accept that. And he even says he's not playing in the 2028 Olympics. I call BS. Run it back.
Well,
age 44 LeBron or 43, whatever it'll be.
It really, more than any other team, this is just the simplest calculus, which is just that their 2 best players will not play as much, and they don't have anybody else that's new to improve on what happened last year.
Now, do you think, though, that we've talked about this with the Warriors, where we can't identify a player that would actually make them a contender? That is within the realm of actually acquiring. Do you get that vibe with the Lakers? And if you do, shouldn't we be more empathetic towards them doing nothing, sort of how the Warriors held their ground in Larry Marketing talks, or is it, well, no, like you have LeBron and AD who are like the sum of the Warriors' two best players right now, Draymond Green and Steph Curry. I guess if you even consider Draymond their second best player, I would. Like it just like LeBron and AD at their peaks are going to amount to more than Steph and Draymond at their peak. Like it does feel like people are more critical of what the Lakers doing nothing than they are of the Warriors, maybe because the Warriors did stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Warriors didn't do nothing. The similarity is that they didn't go get the guy that's like, oh my God, ceiling raiser. Which is, I think in general, just speaking for myself, like I got to try to be better about saying like, why didn't you go do this? It's like, I'm sure they tried. Like there just wasn't a deal that made sense for them. I'm trying to give the executives like a little more benefit of the doubt because like they're spending more time thinking about their team than I am, and they probably have explored a lot of options.
Are we sure?
Well,
when it comes to the Lakers, are we sure?
We're not. I don't know. Maybe less so than other teams, but you know what I mean. Like, yeah, no, I just they have, I think if you're going to say they're going to be better, you have to really believe that the Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, hodgepodge salary match with whatever assets they can trade is something that they would just will do. And maybe more names, more options emerge as the season goes on. But just as it stands now, you cannot say they're going to be better and be like a serious person. I don't think.
Yeah. And even the people that are citing, you get Dalton Connect back and Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt will play more. I think that's wildly disingenuous to just say, I saw this on Twitter that someone thinks Dalton Connect out of the gate is going to be more valuable than Taurean Prince was to them. I guess Taurean Prince is not a good enough player to say that that's outside their own possibility, but to just assume that seems bonkers to me. And the other thing, we already mentioned it, but I just want to point this out in case anyone's like, yeah, Jared Vanderbilt and Gabe Vincent are going to play more. LeBron and AD are not.
Right. How much more are they going to play? Like 164 games between the two of them, and they'll be all-stars? Because that might be what it takes.
Jared Vanderbilt comes with like offensive concessions,
right?
So are we even sure that you're that much? And Gabe Vincent, last time we checked with Gabe Vincent, was not hitting his threes. But the theory of Gabe Vincent, certainly that makes sense.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like they expected D'Angelo Russell to opt out, and they were going to have more flexibility than they thought. And once he opted in, they had no clue what to fucking do. That's my read on their offseason.
Right. All right, let's stay in LA. Let's do the Clippers next. Sorry.
They're going to be worse. Let's move on. My team is going to be.
We could stop. I mean, this can be a quick one too, right? 51 wins last year. Kawhi played 68 games. That's his most since 16-17. He's already somehow hurt or either hurt or not good enough to play on Team USA. So choose, I guess. No Paul George. James Harden, I firmly believe, is in rapid decline. He's not the type of guy that I was watching some James Harden clips the other day from like his MVP Rockets season.
What type of week are you having right now that you were watching film on Jordan Hawkins and James Harden?
Why was I doing that? I don't know. The algorithm told me to watch it probably or something. I was writing about Jordan Hawkins. That was it. I don't know what I was thinking about James Harden. Anyway, he's 25 pounds up from that, like conservatively, and does not move the same way. Newsflash, right? Like none of us.
What do you think you could bench these days?
Still probably a beast on the bench, I would say. None of us are what we used to be. The Clips were also 15-14 after the All-Star break. The days of us talking about that 30-3 or whatever it is, like that's not a thing. Kawhi won't be as healthy. Paul George is gone. They can't win 51 games. What else you got? Chris Dunn's going to save it.
What is the pathway to them getting better? They don't even have the assets to get better. Yeah, they could dangle a distant first-round swap and pick. I don't know who the best player you're getting for that is. And I mean, like they did make something like Batum is back. Derek Jones Jr. gives them that athleticism element on both ends of the floor. Okay, sure. But it's like, I don't feel good about what does this team look like on offense at the end of the day? I mean, you have James Harden, who I still think is a very talented playmaker, but okay, then Kawhi is kind of a secondary person, but Bones Highland or Kevin Porter Jr. or Chris Dunn is kind of making up your backup point guard minutes. And if you want to throw Nick Batum in there, okay, sure. It's just and it makes, honestly, the way their roster just looks right now, I don't understand what they were thinking with the Paul George stuff. I just don't like the second apron boogeyman thing is just, you were willing to pay him to go into the second apron, at least like you were going to sign him to a 3-year deal. What's the difference with a 4-year deal? Just figure out a way to move him. There'll be teams that will trade for Paul George.
Right.
I honestly think that they saw what happened to Kawhi at the end of last season and said, no, this isn't like it's over.
Yeah.
We might as well lean into it.
And you know what? They weren't wrong. Like, cause we're saying it is over. It's just, so I guess, yeah, the Paul George thing, asset preservation, like clearly Paul George had a market value that you could have signed him to that number and traded him for something. Like you could have done it as opposed to letting him leave. But yeah, I just, this is another quick one for me. I don't really, again, like you said, I don't know what the argument is for how they're like meaningfully better.
Is there a team that you would say if they traded Kawhi here, he won't just retire?
That's why Dan, I haven't considered that hypothetical before. I don't know. The Lakers, is that the only one? If you trade him there,
so both of these are, because the Clippers are still a first apron team, I believe. So like these are two teams that can't take back more money. So just like that makes it super difficult for them, unless I'm misreading the Clippers salary situation, which I don't think I am. I thought about maybe Golden State.
Maybe, yeah.
So, but even though those are tough, like those are tough waters to traverse too. Which I understand that it's not California, but if it was Oklahoma City, which is like, hey, we'll play you 20 minutes a game.
Do what you
go
want.
there and win a title.
You can stay in San Diego 5 days a week, just fly out for like the Thursday game. Maybe that's how you do it. He plays once a week, and that's it. He doesn't have to live in Oklahoma City. He can stay where he is. Yeah, that's probably the answer, right? We should mock up that fake trade.
So it's my turn, right?
Yep.
I'm going to go just because I want to hear your thoughts on it. And we haven't done grades yet, but where are the Warriors at right now? They won 46 last year. And so out goes Klay Thompson, but in comes Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton. And you have Brandon Podziemski is going to be a year more season. Jonathan Kuminga had a very strong close to the season. Where are the Warriors better? What's happening here?
I think they're a little better. And part of it is just like, there's always lots of things that can go wrong, but they won 46 with Draymond Green being suspended for a ton of time. Even though he's declined significantly, he's still like a hugely valuable piece and just someone whose minutes historically coincide with like successful stretches. Klay Thompson was awful. Andrew Wiggins was like basically unplayable. So I wouldn't put any stock. Like if you think what version of Andrew Wiggins is showing up this year, like congratulations, there's one of you. Like I could not possibly guess. It's hard for me to imagine he'll be worse. So you combine the like how much worse could it get with, I do think Kuminga, Podziemski, even Trace Jackson Davis, the latter two having much lower floors, like they should be a little better. Kuminga was getting jerked around in the rotation until he basically said, like, my coach doesn't believe in me in the media, and then started to play more and was really good. I think the free agent additions insulate them a little bit in the event that, Podziemski or any of the young guys don't really pop. So I think you put all that together and combine it with the most important fact, which is they're not going to get Lauri Markkanen, but they're pretty clearly interested in making a big trade that adds a major improvement, right? So whoever that ends up being, I just think their willingness to do that, their interest in it, suggests that it's more likely they get better in a win now sense than not. So, and 46 isn't a ton of wins. I'm not going to say they're going to win 55 or even 50. I just think they'll be a little bit better for all those reasons. Take that wherever you want to.
I could get on board with that, and I will defer to you. When I think from a talent perspective, they look better. I'm still just like, I know that you should get more games from Draymond, and Pods and Kuminga will be better. You got 74 games out of Steph last year. You're getting 74.
That's the best counter is that he may not be that guy anymore.
And I would argue that you're probably less equipped to be good on offense independent of Steph now that Chris Paul is gone. Just like the playmaking, like DeAnthony Melton is like, okay, then you have Kyle Anderson, but what's up with DeAnthony Melton's back? He's not a fantastic passer. He's gotten a little bit better at the live dribble stuff. Kyle Anderson, yeah, good playmaker, but not going to stretch the floor for you. And can you play him and Draymond Green at the same time? I guess if Draymond is your 5, that's something you could explore. The Andrew Wiggins of it all, he might be more available, but what version of him are you going to get? I have some concerns with I'm probably less concerned than consensus about what's going on at the center position for them. Because Draymond just might be better off suited like playing more 5 overall at this point in his career. Kevon Looney was not good last year, though. You do have Trace Jackson Davis, so you think he's going to get better. You have that going for you. I actually really like the Lindy Waters acquisition. I think people are going to make fun of me, but like Lindy Waters is just like, if you want more defense while also preserving the motion shooting element, you could play him over Buddy Hield. And me specifically, I won't get mad. I know that's not what they're going to do, but I won't get mad. And then I'm hopeful Moses Moody gets more minutes because I think that that's someone who's ready to contribute now and has been ready for a while. So yes. I lean towards better as well, but we're getting to a point where it's like there's only so many wins that can go around in the Western Conference, and they're in that like that tier with the Kings where it's like 46 is like it feels like the same. Would almost make more sense just because Steph and Draymond are also just getting older. So let's say Steph is as available and Draymond is more available. Are they as good as they were last season? And the question is, I don't know. So I do feel like there's wiggle room to think worse here, but the talent overall, the talent on this roster is better, I think, than it was last season.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. The way I would frame it is that like Steph Curry is not a top 5 player anymore, but I do think you could make the case that in terms of like importance to his team or like how much his team lives and dies with him, he's a top 5 guy. Like there's Jokic, I don't even know if you put Giannis there because the Bucks still have Dame, right? Like, and if Luka gets hurt, Kyrie Irving can run. Like if Steph is hurt and not playing, like there is no offense here. Like there's no functional offense. So the bottom falls out to like an insane degree if he's not healthy, and he's going into his age 36 season. So like you should not assume health at that point.
Is there a chance though that Pods gets there as just like in the Steph-less minutes? Because I think the more I've watched Pods, and after Joe Lacob made those comments about him being a future All-Star, which I wouldn't predict, but I went back and I was watching a lot of Pods and I'm like, I feel like there might just be more offensive creation for both himself and others than we're just assuming at this point. Like he shot like 40% or something on step back threes last year and took a good amount of them.
I think certainly he's someone that makes other players better. I think that was apparent like from the jump last year. I need to see a lot more and a few different things from him as an individual shot creator, like for himself, before I buy him being anything more than like adequate at that. Just because the size, the types of shots he's able to generate tend to be really hard for him.
Yeah.
So like, it's possible. I don't see the all-star ceiling. I think he's going to be a really good player for a long time. But like he's the guy that you would cite even more so than Kuminga, who I think in the ideal version, certainly in his mind, I'm like Kawhi Leonard on the ball. Like that's my role. I don't think the Warriors see him that way. I don't think anyone should see him that way. So like, that's not the route I see as like, okay, if Steph is seriously diminished or hurt, Kuminga is going to run. I don't think that's realistic. Podziemski is someone who could like hold the fort down, but I just think teams will say, you got to score on us to a player like him. And that's going to be like tough sledding.
Are you, very quickly, when you're saying better, are you caking in the assumption or a prediction that they're going to make some type of a trade?
I don't know if I'd phrase it quite that way. I think I am factoring in for them, it seems more likely than for like a lot of teams because they've already shown like a willingness to go pretty far down that road with Markkanen, and they were in on Paul George too, remember? So like they're clearly like not totally comfortable with the idea of, well, just the young guys will be better and we'll be fine. Like, so I don't know if I'd say it's definitely going to happen, but it's much more likely for them than like 25 other teams probably. So I think you got to include that in your thinking. My turn here. Let's go. So don't want to pick anybody right next to him. Okay. This spot's a little lonely over here. Let's do the Dallas Mavericks.
Do you think they're upset that they didn't get to go first, like always when we do this podcast? You think Nico Harrison just in his office in the fetal position, bawling his eyes out?
They've had to wait for too long. So the 50-win Dallas Mavericks are not really a real thing because that factors in what they were before they remade the roster. They closed with a 12-3 record. I don't know if you remember this, Dan. They made something called the NBA Finals. And so I don't view them as a 50-win team as like a baseline. I think they're better than that. And so I just, as a starting point, it's like, well, we should be talking about them as if they were a 54-win team or something, something higher than that. So from that sense, it's just like, well, the questions need to be, how much better does Derek Lively get? is this the year Luka's in shape and like really cares? Because if it is, then we're talking 60 wins or whatever. Like it's just that's the thing hanging out there of like there's another level for Dallas, and it's if Luka like remakes his body. I'm not banking on it. That's a possibility. And then I think maybe we differed a little bit on this, so maybe you could take it after this. Is the trade-off of Derrick Jones Jr. basically instead of him, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, is that an addition or a subtraction? Go ahead. I'm saying they're going to be better. I'm just not totally sure on that last point, and I know you have some thoughts on it.
I'm pretty bullish on what they did this offseason because I think you can make the case that Klay Thompson plus Najee Marshall is just better than Derrick Jones. I mean, in a vacuum, yes, but for when you're measuring fit, I think there's still a case. What I think people have overlooked that they also did is in the process of getting off Tim Hardaway Jr. is they brought in Quentin Grimes. Okay. And so that is someone who can absolutely defend the point of attack if he's healthy. And so, like, I don't think they're going to feel the absence of Derrick Jones Jr. quite as much as people think. It might make them have more of an offensive leaning identity, particularly in closing time. If we assume that it's going to be Klay Thompson plus PJ Washington, Luka, Kyrie, and then a big, sure. But if you're not going to give a chance to Najee Marshall or Dante Exum or Quentin Grimes to get those minutes, I understand maybe your concern there, but I think it's okay to lean into your offensive identity when you have Luka and Kyrie. Mm-hmm. And I think the stuff they're going to be able to run with Klay, just flying off screens. And you said it with the Warriors that Klay was bad last year. I think defensively he was bad. And honestly, I wouldn't even say he's bad. He's old.
His shot selection was trash, but he still had the gravity, which is what you're getting to.
Right. And I think it's easier for him to accept a different role or to live in a more confining role outside the Golden State bubble where he has all that history. And it's not just he has that history, but the two other guys he came up with, Draymond Green and Steph Curry, they are still just mission critical and kind of playing their same roles for the most part. And so it's easier for him to make that functional adaptation in Dallas, and he will. Just like, and also I think what makes it easier is Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are just inherently more ball dominant than anyone on Golden State last year, except for maybe Chris Paul in his heyday anyway. So I'm pretty bullish on their offseason. I think it's because so much of it happened early on, but it feels like it's flown under the radar. I do think you'll miss having Derrick Jones Jr.'s athleticism and just like, hey, you just go defend so-and-so. Like you can move them up the positional spectrum in a way that you probably can't with Najee Marshall or Quentin Grimes, where they're at two different ends of the spectrum. At the same time, they just have the ability to be massive. Klay Thompson is 6'7", and you have PJ Washington, you have a big. Luka Doncic is huge. In the lineups without Kyrie Irving, if you want to play Klay and Najee Marshall with Luka, PJ Washington, and Derrick, you're just huge.
Yeah.
And so I think this team is, I wouldn't go 60 wins. I never predict a team to win 60 wins. Right. I need to be better about doing that. But this feels like 55 plus win territory to me. So even if you're using that 54 wins as a baseline, it's harder to answer this way, but I'd probably still go better.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think mid 50s feels, I don't know if it's conservative, but it feels like that's a totally defensible number. And we just need to get over 50. So I think easy enough, I think, for the Mavs.
I'm going to do something here and force you to have to be the one that completes a row. So I'm going to take a team from the second row. I am going to go with my Oklahoma City Thunder because they're so often ascribed to me. And you know what? I will gladly take that ownership. They won, Grant, 57 games last year. Did you know that? That's quite a lot of basketball games.
Wow. I
have them as better. You could tell me that they went 74-8 and I'd be like, I believe it. Their roster is so deep and so talented. And I think they addressed two of what I considered their three biggest needs, where it's, can we get someone into the closing lineup that you know is going to be more of a reliable shooter than Lou Dort or Josh Giddey? In comes Alex Caruso, and you sacrifice nothing defensively, even if you're not playing Lou Dort, basically. Lou Dort is stronger, for sure. But now if he's just replacing the Josh Giddey minutes, my God. You get Isaiah Hartenstein, who can play next to Chet Holmgren, is going to give you a presence on the glass. He has some dynamism to him on the offensive end in terms of a passer. I think they're actually going to let him shoot threes. Tom Thibodeau would not in New York. And I look at this roster and I go, they just have Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe are floating around like their 7th and 8th most important players, and they would certainly be more than that to any other team. What is the theory of the Thunder being worse? And I think you could point to and say they still kind of need the other shot creator because Jalen Williams wasn't there during the postseason. And so it's all on Shea at points. Guess what? We talk a lot about players getting better. You know who's going to continue to get better? Jalen Williams.
Guy,
that's not you saying this. That's me. So I feel like it means something now.
Yeah, it's not just total bullshit, because I would say no matter what, he could be dead, and I'd be like, I really like his outlook next year.
You're more casual about throwing around the superstar designation to him, but you're not wrong. It's just you say it more often. That's like that's absolutely his ceiling. So I'm in lockstep with you on him, and it's also just I'm open to the idea that Aaron Wiggins is going to continue to get better. And I also think we've mentioned this already. A big part of just going from Josh Giddey to Alex Caruso is in the one big minutes. Your floor should just be completely spaced out now. In terms of, Josh Giddey spaced the floor, but defenses didn't care. They're going to care when Alex Caruso, who just shot over 40% from three on pretty good volume, is out there. They're going to be able to explore more of the on-ball dynamic from Chet Holmgren. And even if you don't think he's going to develop all of these different counters, you're just going to drive into the lane, and he has enough of a handle to make things happen there, whether it's kickouts or just get finishing at the basket from mid-range. Like, that's stuff that's within his arsenal. This is like, I'm going to tell you right now, and things could change. I have kicked around the idea of just picking Oklahoma City to win the title. And I think because I didn't disrespect, I ended up being way too low on the Celtics last year. I'm reticent to pick anyone other than them, but this team is right there. And it just, you don't get to use the excuse, well, they haven't played in the moment yet. They just did in the playoffs. And the Mavericks kind of gave them the old what for at one point, but now they've gone through it, and their player, like Jalen Williams specifically, I think is a player who's going to be better. Like, he might have been the single player on that roster who benefited most from just that postseason crucible.
Yep. No, I think I'm trying to think of like a different angle to take here. I would focus on the defense, I think, which was really good last year. They were fourth, right? So, but in terms of relatively, that was their worst end of the floor because they were third on offense. Can you just think about being an opposing offensive player and seeing a lineup, however you want to do, whoever the fifth guy is? It could be Case and Wallace, it could be J-Dub, it could be Hartenstein. You got Caruso, Dort, SGA, and Chet Holmgren on the floor defensively. Like, this team is going to be the best defense in the league. I feel really confident. I don't know if they're going to win the most games because Boston exists, but I just think the personnel is so good defensively. They have, like, I don't know where you rank them, but between Caruso and Dort, like, they're, immediate mentions in like, who's the guy that sucks the most to be guarded by on the perimeter. Like, they got two of them. And I think Chet Holmgren is like, he's kind of taking on my new J-Dub like mantle, where it's like, I think he's gonna join Williams as someone that's like, if maybe both of them won't be all-stars, but they will both be guys that we talk about a lot when we're picking, ahead of time. And I think even if they, here's the other thing, even if they hadn't gone out and gotten Caruso and Hartenstein, I would still pick them to win more games. So how do you pick them to win fewer when they went and got two phenomenal additions to the roster?
You picked them to win fewer because the number is just intimidating on paper.
I don't care.
I think it's easier for fans of teams, and this isn't an insult. I hate that I feel the need to clarify this all the time, but it's not an insult. But fans of the team are like, they're going to win 63 or something. It's just harder for me zoomed out to the 60 win. Like, that's what they don't need to get there to be better, but they're at 57. Like, being better looks like getting into 60 win territory. And that number has always been inherently intimidating for me, just like to predict that a team will win it. But this is, if you have to predict one team in the regular season to win that many games, this is the team, because Boston's dealing with the Porzingis injury until like 2025, probably.
Yeah, and Boston now knows we don't need to do that again. Like, they should be so confident that they can keep the foot off for a little while.
To be fair, the Thunder don't need to do that, but they have like two good rotations in one. Like, they just have like 10 guys that would be like, their 6 through 10 guys might be the top 5 on certain teams, basically.
Well, and they're younger, and it's like, they're probably stinging a little bit from how they went out. And it's just like, it's one of those things, how do you factor in like a mentality or like motivation to a win total? Isn't it just easier to imagine the Thunder being like, fuck it. Like, we're going for, like, we are dead serious about this. We have so much to prove. We're all young. Like, we can run forever. Like, it's just, they're well coached. We haven't even talked about that. Like, Mark Daigneault is going to organize these guys in the correct way. It's not like it's feel hard to fit them.
And this is not, maybe Ime Udoka will be fine with it, but when you're talking about having too many guys to play, like, Oklahoma City in theory is a team like that, but Mark Daigneault, like, that's just been the status quo since he came into Oklahoma City, is, hey, you need to figure out a way to fit 20 guys into this 12-man rotation. Because, like, when you look at they're top 10. Like, we didn't mention Jay Will or Kenrich Williams. They're like, and you include Aaron Wiggins, I think you can say comfortably there are 10 to 11 guys that would just get minutes on every single other team in the NBA. If you feel weird about Jay Will, okay, fine. But then there are 10 guys. And also, by the way, they seem pretty invested in Dylan Jones. They move up to get him. They'll probably find developmental minutes for him with the big club too. So and you didn't say it specifically. You laid it out with the lineups. They just have 4 dudes. And depending on how you feel about off-ball disruption with SGA, they have 5 dudes that could just make all defense.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. They're less subject to like the vagaries of, oh, it's an off shooting night. They can just win games defensively. That's going to be the same all the time. Like, that's not going to fluctuate. They just have the guys that guard the whole. I don't know what else we need to say. We're getting over our skis a little bit.
The one thing that might be interesting, I'm not manifesting it, but if they are a team as good as they are, and you could say this about a lot of teams, do you feel comfortable, like, if Shea needs to miss some time, they feel more at risk than if Jason Tatum needs to miss some time in Boston?
Yeah, with Shea specifically, I guess, just because what we saw is that other than him in the playoffs, like, there's not someone that can reliably get shots. I don't know if I'd foreclose on either Holmgren or J-Dub, like, improving enough to where that's not fatal. But yeah, I think you're right about that. Like, the Celtics the numbers bore it out last year, right? The Celtics were still awesome without Tatum. SGA. Yeah, well, actually, I don't remember what the on-off splits were for SGA. I just remember they weren't as good as Jokic's, but nobody's are. So
I'm going to say that they're probably going to win 62 or more games next season.
They're my pick to run away with the West, whatever that means. I think they've tied with the Wolves at 57. I don't see anybody else having improved themselves as much as the Thunder did. Speaking of, is it my turn? Let's just do the Wolves now, because they also won 57 last year. If you had to, well, maybe let's start here. If you had to guess if I'm going to say better or worse, what would you guess?
I think you're going to say worse.
You're wrong. I'm saying better.
Wow.
And it's a hard one, and it's not as like analytical as I think we like to try to be. And it's mostly just Anthony Edwards is that guy, and I don't think he's anywhere near topped out. And I don't think that there's a reason to believe the defense will be meaningfully worse. I know I just said the Thunder will have the best defense. I think Minnesota is going to be right there. And if you combine what might be the second, third, whatever, maybe the best, if I, have to backtrack a little on OKC defense I just think Anthony Edwards is going to be better, which is a high bar to clear. I think they're going to be motivated too by, especially Edwards, I think, is kind of a chip on the shoulder guy, like thinks he's the greatest, justifiably sometimes, is going to want to take another step forward in terms of how deep this team goes. The downside is a Conley injury is still a problem, even with Dillingham there. I just can't count on a rookie, even if he seems tailor-made for the role he's going to play to really be a meaningful guy. It's just Ant and the defense. So I'd open it up to you to go with any other angles. And I'm open to, like, Grant, you're stupid. They're going to be worse. They were way too good last year. You have to pick worse. That's a good argument too. But it's Ant, it's the defense.
I would probably lean worse just for what you just said. And I think, look, Rudy Gobert, 32, had finger surgery. We just found that out today. Does that impact him at all? Or is he
still got 9 more? That's fine.
There you go. That's fine. Mike Conley's older, in addition to the injury risk. Do we see kind of him take a step back? And the other thing is, you mentioned him, Rob Dillingham. Yeah, he seems perfect for what they need. And a lot of people have made much ado about his size. He's 6'3". He's not like we've seen 6'3" players before be just fine. And this team, I think offenses will attack him, but they're just built to insulate him. I'm more concerned with the idea of, for what you gave up, he's entering training camp or the season as your backup point guard. And to give a rookie higher stakes minutes on a will be championship contender, that's always thorny. And you look at him, and I think in Summer League, we might see adjustments, of course, when he gets to the regular season, but the theory of him makes so much sense. Someone who will get off the ball quickly. He will make shot. He'll create his own jumpers. He'll make jumpers off the catch, but, like, he's not going to get all the way through to the paint against NBA length and size. And if you view him as someone that you want to play during the non-Ant minutes, I think what's going to wind up happening is he's going to face a lot of blitzes, a lot of doubles, and then they're just going to force other players on the court at that point to beat them. And if Ant's not on the court, who is that? And like, yes, the Timberwolves ran into those same problems without Anthony Edwards last year. I'm just not sure, like long term, maybe Rob Dillingham addresses what's their biggest need, but they're in this weird territory. And I think it'll be easier to button up once you get to the playoffs. But for the regular season specifically, I might frame it this way. I think the Wolves will probably be a bigger threat to win it all next year, but they're going to win fewer regular season games. And part of that might just be, do they not care about winning as many regular season games as they did last season? But to your counterpoint, we didn't mention Jaden McDaniels. He can't have a worse offensive season than he did he came alive during the playoffs, but he probably is not going to get worse. So, and I mean, if Cat doesn't suffer an injury towards the end of the year and you have to integrate him, I think that this team's championship stock, I would say it's pointing upward, but just in terms of winning more regular season games, I have a tougher time of it's possible. Don't get me wrong. I just have a tougher time getting there.
I think you've made the better argument. I think we got to go worse. How much of a pain in the ass is it for you to change the graphic that some tiny percentage of people listening to this will see?
Wow, you need to pump it. We're the most popular podcast in the world.
I forgot about that.
It's already been changed. I think that's the right call, and maybe they'll live to outperform us. This is, by the way, doing this without looking at over-unders is I've been trying to steer clear of those. People are starting to come out with the over-under pods. I have not listened or like really dissected into it. I'm going to be fascinated to see where their over-under winds up.
Yeah, we should keep this in mind when we do that, or just because it's always such a different exercise, the over-under, because the number is almost every time it's like, oh shit, that's exactly how many wins I thought they were going to have. Okay, cool. That was the Wolves. You got two teams to choose from.
Ooh. Let's go to the Jazz. Okay. So Larry Markkanen's going to be in Utah for all of next year. As we predicted, someone shouted us out. Shout out to whoever shouted us out for predicting that he was going to sign the extension before all the reporting came out that he was going. It just seemed like for him, it seemed like the logical move.
Yeah.
Where are the Utah Jazz going is a fair question, but I think even with Larry Markkanen, they're going to be worse. And they won 31 games last year. Now, the way they get to being worse, I think, is you just start to run out of teams that can be bad in the West. Right. And so even though you have Colin Sexton, even though you have Larry Markkanen, even though you have John Collins, even though you have Jordan Clarkson, even though it's probably difficult to say we're going to play all the young dudes over some of these guys, it just might not matter. Like, you might not be as bad as you should be if you want Cooper Flag, but they'll win 30 games instead of 31, though, is how I frame it. They are invested. I don't think the only way I see them being better is if you re-signed Larry Markkanen with the intent of, well, we're going to turn around and we're maybe going to try and trade for Brandon Ingram and get better right away, because they were involved in the Mikal Bridges sweepstakes. And if they want to go that route, they have the tools to, go that route and still just say, we're not done. We have other assets. But I do think that they're going to end up, maybe it'll be another sort of midseason about face, prioritizing their draft lottery stock. And I will say, I don't know if that's necessarily ideal, because you're going to be caught in this weird limbo again, where you're a lottery team, but you're not a high enough lottery team to believe that you're going to get one of the top picks. That's almost, or not, it's not immaterial to this conversation, but if you're talking about the Jazz's overarching direction, it's fair to be concerned about that. But for this, I don't think they're in danger of being, oh man, they're a 35 win team and they need to pull out the rug again. Like, I think they might need to shut down guys or play them less once you get later in the season, including Larry Markkanen. But by the way, I don't know if he really wants to be there, and you've had the conversation with them. He's now under contract. You don't need to worry about ruining his trade value or making him unhappy. He's paid. He's on the books. He can't leave. If you want to shut him down or cap his minutes or do both throughout the season, you can just do that. And so now there's at least clarity now that you know what's happening with Larry Markkanen, because you can't move him during the season. So I think they'll win fewer, even if they go for it, just because the Western Conference, again, you look at this, we're on the board. There's no team like the Clippers, in theory, might be going to the season like, we're kind of fucked, but they already know, like, their draft assets are headed out the other. Right. So the Blazers are the only team as of right now that you look at and say they are intending to maximize their draft lottery position. And then I think after that, maybe the Spurs enter that conversation. Maybe there's a surprise team that enters it, but I think it's going to end up being Utah. And it might be out of the gate, in the sense that, I'll frame it this way. We normally just don't see trades happen early in the season. It wouldn't shock me if, like, Colin Sexton gets moved in November or something like
that. I think the Markkanen, it does clarify some things, but it also, Wouldn't you love to know? And maybe I haven't looked at much of the reporting. Maybe this is out there. I haven't seen it. Like, certainly there were conversations between Markkanen and the Jazz about like, what's this season gonna look like? Because, and I think the main motivation for him signing when he's, so he can't be traded this year is because he likes Utah and doesn't want to be traded. But was there a conversation of, okay, we want to keep you, we're gonna be bad like on purpose this year? Or was it, if you sign and commit to us on this new deal, we're gonna, like you said, turn around and trade guys to get better this year? I presumably some version of that conversation happened. I would just love to know like what was discussed, because that would give us a real vision into like, okay, what is the direction for this team? I just think it really comes down to like, what's the argument for them really trying hard to be better? And I guess it would be that like, if you're talking about the draft lottery, what is it? The bottom 4 records get the 14% chance at the top pick. Mm-hmm. So like, it's not just the West. It's, are we going to be worse than all, some number? You got to start thinking about Washington, Detroit, Brooklyn, like these. It's not just the West. Like, how do we assure we're a bottom 4 record in the league? That's too hard. Those other teams are too bad. We have Larry Markkanen, like, so we might as well try to win 34 games or something. Because we don't want to have the 5th or 6th worst record. Maybe that's, I don't know that makes tons of sense, but like, that's how it would have to be sort of gamed out for it to make sense for them to try to hit the over, I guess, or win more than 31. I just kind of agree with you. Like, the wins are just going to be so much harder to come by. They're one of the only 2 teams in the conference that is incentivized to lose. And so I think they're worse. But I think, would you agree that they have the capacity to be better more so than like Portland does? I guess the win totals are different, so it's a hard comparison. But like Markkanen and the vets they have, like they've already proved they can kind of mess around and like play above 500 ball for like good chunks of the year. They've done it twice in a row. I just don't think you can do that three straight seasons and then pull the ripcord, in January.
Which is why, doesn't it feel like they're a classic TBD team in the sense of this can't be it. It's like they're going to end up trading away players before the offseason's out, or they're going to go out and acquire players that help them win, because I just can't buy into the fact of, you mentioned it, that they're going to, for a 3rd consecutive season, just pull the ripcord. I mentioned it before saying if they do it earlier, but like, what does that even, they could make a trade earlier in the, like, to start the season if they think that if they want to be better than expected, but why risk that for a 3rd consecutive season? So it's just like, I honestly think there's a chance they end up being better because they decide, look, we have Larry Markkanen, we've got all these assets. The Pelicans are willing to accept John Collins, Walker Kessler, and a dirt cheap 1st round pick. And we're just going to get Brandon Ingram and see how that works. Like, I'm honestly just open to them exploring that path, because they can't, this can't be like, the plan can't be to, we're going to re-sign Larry Markkanen, run it back, and we'll kind of figure out like what to do when we get to December, January. It can't be that.
And to that point, with the Thunder kind of just generally not working this way, and also having a roster that we agree is awesome and basically finished for the most part, Utah is a team that can make the Godfather, like, here's 57 1st round picks for the next disgruntled star. Like, we know you probably don't want to come to Utah, but we can make the best offer for you. So like, just pick Clarkson and Collins and whatever else for salary matching. And here's a bunch of picks. We can just go get,
what the player is? You know what the player is? I'm going to mention him for so many teams. You know who the player is. LaMelo Ball. That's the player.
Yeah.
Under contract. He's young. I know Markkanen's not super young, so you don't have to go that route, but like LaMelo Ball on this team, I know you have Keontae George, but they could play off each other, or maybe Keontae George is in that trade package in lieu of draft equity. They might even be a team that, depending on how they feel about Mark Williams right now, I assume they're still pretty high on him since they didn't take Donovan Clingan and they took Salon instead. They might like Walker. So if you're Utah though, Grant, now that you have extended Larry Markkanen, what are you? You're in charge of the Jazz. Are you just saying, no, we have Lowry, we're going to trade everybody else, or we're going to make it clear to Sexton and Clarkson and these guys that they're not going to play a ton? Or, and honestly, maybe this is short-sighted of me, but they have so many assets, and I just don't see a way for them to be bad enough to like really juice up their lottery odds. I'm probably going the route of, oh, Brandon Ingram's cheap. Why not? Or I'll go all in for a LaMelo Ball, like someone who's younger, under contract for a while, that can noticeably impact their ceiling.
Man, my first instinct was I really want Cooper Flag, and I already missed out on Wembanyama because we didn't tank soon enough. I can't let it happen twice in a 3-year span.
Fair.
But like, you did bring back Markkanen, like, and it did happen with the timing that makes him untradeable this season. I think your route makes more sense given where they are. And then, like, it makes me uncomfortable because you're just giving up on the idea probably of we're going to go get like a real, like someone better, someone that could be better than Markkanen or could be better than LaMelo or Ingram or whoever we end up with. Like, you're closing that door a little bit, even though the draft's a crapshoot. Who knows? They could draft 7th and get the best player in the history of planet Earth. You never know. But like, I think I'm more with you that maybe you should add to this group. You already got 1 million picks, right? Maybe that's the play. I don't know.
By the way, and finally, I know people could say, well, Lauri Markkanen is more valuable as a trade asset on this extension. That is totally fair. But if you re-signed him with the intent to move him, you're in still an awkward situation of you're not going to help his trade value if you cap his minutes or shut him down at some point. That's not going to help his trade value. And then if you're going to play him full bore, you're then only going to hurt your draft lottery stock, which matters because you would in theory then be planning on trading him. And so that's why I almost wonder, there feels like there might be, even if they're tiny, there might be fireworks in Utah left this offseason, because I personally do not see the logic behind re-signing him and then still prioritizing the ultra long gamer. We want to go get Cooper Flag or have a top lottery pick, in part because I just don't see the pathway to them doing that without shutting him down, which makes no sense.
Isn't the logic that, and it's probably, to me, it's flawed. Isn't the logic that by getting Markkanen under contract for more years, he is a more valuable trade asset? Except the problem is he's a more valuable trade asset after a whole fucking year of playing on this team that's not trying to win, theoretically. Like, that's I don't know, man. Like, I'm not sure that can work.
If you traded on it, the other thing that's so hard about the team is, who are you trading that's not Markkanen? They say, that'll make the Jazz a lot worse. Like,
yeah, they don't have that guy.
It's Sexton is probably, like, to me, the closest. And then even if you trade or shut down these vets, we're just going to rule out that Keontae George or Cody Williams just kind of pop, or Taylor Hendricks pops. And I feel like I'm negatively critiquing the direction they're headed in. It's just so is it optionality? Is it lack of form? What is happening here? But at this point, I'm sort of bullish on the idea of, you might as well just try and get better and hope that, one, that helps you, but also that all these other teams as picks that you own, looking specifically at Cleveland or Minnesota, that some of those later selections just become gold you're either able to use in a trade to make you like hit that level, or you end up with a top 7 prospect or whatever.
So then why aren't we saying they're going to be better? I think most of the arguments we've made is that it's easier in a lot of ways for them to be better, or it's like it makes more sense for them to try to be better. So is it just the West is hard, everybody else is above them? It's who can they leapfrog, so they should tank or whatever. Like, but we've I don't know how long we talked about the Jazz, but they're an interesting team for all these reasons. Like, shouldn't we just say they're going to be better, since we agree, I think, pretty clearly that like that's what you should try to do? No,
because here's my issue, is that if you're going to say they're going to be better, you either have to be just a huge believer in the roster that they have right now, or you're predicting that they're going to make that winish now, if you want to phrase it that way, move. And I'm not going to predict that, because Danny Ainge he's kind of in the Daryl Morey camp, where he's been willing to make uncomfortable moves or non-moves where others haven't. And so it wouldn't shock me if his plan is just, we're going to run it back and I'll make the decision midseason again.
Yeah. No, I think we got to stay worse, but I feel less confident in that than I did before we started talking about it. Because
so do I. I will say that,
there's a lot of.
But I guess the question is, we already answered what we would do, which is to go out there and make a move that makes you better. What do you think they're actually more likely to do? To make that move, to either, or then sell off either before the season or in the middle of the season again?
I don't know now. I don't know anything anymore. Yeah, I'm not sure. It could go either way. Maybe it's just as simple as Danny Ainge is like his defining characteristic is like he is an opportunist when it comes to transacting. And maybe we're kind of being facetious, but maybe it really is. He's just like, we'll just kind of see. We'll see where we are. We'll see what's out there. We got, what's the urgency? We can decide what to do when the situation presents itself. And granted, I think also that does cost you probably your best chance to finish as a bottom 4 team. And maybe they don't care about that.
Is there any possibility that we're overestimating or underestimating how hard it is to pick up wins as a Western Conference team at this point? Because could they win like noticeably fewer than 30? But I guess you run into let's go to the East. So we know the Blazers are going to be worse than the Jazz, assuming that
that's it. And the question you're asking is, where do those wins come from if they're going to get more of them? And it's like, the Grizzlies are going to pick up 25 more. The Spurs are going to win 20 more or whatever. Yeah. Like we look at our board, like we've got way more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So not way more, but we've got more teams improving than not. So like, and most of our, like you said it, the Clippers, like maybe some of the wins come from there, but other than that, it's like, where do you find them?
Do you think that when you're looking at the East very quickly, I guess I'm not prepared to say that many teams are going to be worse than Utah. Detroit and Washington for sure. I think Brooklyn will get itself there. So that's 4 teams. Are you prepared to say that the Bulls, the Raptors, or the Hornets are going to be worse than those? Are the teams that you look at and say, well, I could see a scenario where it's a coin flip, or if Chicago starts moving players or isn't playing certain guys. The Hornets, if LaMelo gets injured again or misses time. But like, I would still say like Utah, even is currently constructed, I'm not prepared to guarantee that they'll be better than the Raptors, Bulls, or Hornets. But I think you could say safely they'll be better than one of them at least. And so now all of a sudden it's okay. That's a bottom 6 record, right?
Right. So that was what I was saying earlier. It's just like, it's going to be real hard to assure you get that. You would have to do a ton of like purposeful maneuvering to make like, we're definitely a bottom 4 team, because 31 wins is like, that's a lot. That's a lot when you're talking about like, how far do we have to fall to get into this range we want? And it might be impossible. Like you might just not be able to, you can't get as bad as Washington, as bad as I think Brooklyn might be really bad. You mentioned Detroit. Like there's just, the Jazz won more than twice as many games as both Detroit and Washington last year. Like I just don't, it's going to be tough. I don't know. Really interesting, sneaky, interesting team to talk about.
And we literally came to zero like consensus or resolution with them. We have them as worse, but we talked in circles for 15 minutes.
Oh, for sure. All right, let's do an easier one. And it's our last one, right? Let's do Denver.
And look, you were worried about us going in a draft type order, and we did it. We didn't even try to do the same team twice or forget one. Look at that. Look at us.
First of all, I have to go back and correct. I said the Wolves won 57. They won 56 last year, as I'm just sorting here. The Nuggets won 57, tied with OKC for the most in the West. So that's a high bar. They are more dependent on one player than anybody else. That one player, I still think, and I think we agree, is the best player in the world. But if Jokic misses,
because they didn't really act like it this summer, but carry on.
We'll get to that. That's going to be a big part of the argument. If he's hurt, like they are not going to be favored to like beat like anybody. They might go, if Jokic misses 2 weeks, they might be favored to win like 1 game in that stretch. Just from a betting odds perspective, this is what the numbers would say, right? Like, they just fall apart. Jamal Murray's health ? KCP is gone. That's the big one. Like, even if you don't think he mattered all that much, he was still a 5th starter on a team that won a title. He'd won a title before. He's just an ideal role player, still pretty much as good as he's ever been. And they didn't do anything to replace him. They're banking on youth. I just don't see. And Russell Westbrook. and maybe that's where we should stop. 57 is too high for me, even though, well, maybe also because I forget who, KCP was the one that said they ran out of gas, right? Because they had to put on a run at the end of the year because they cared about their seeding and they ran out of juice in the playoffs. Maybe that's an argument that they won't do that. And
like,
that will
like anybody, he then retired to Orlando. Look at KCP. Really.
He was done. I don't know. Do you think they're going to win more? I think they're going to be worse.
So we have a lot of Nuggets followers on YouTube, and I love every single one of you. I think there's a possibility that Jokic is so good, and if they get good health and Christian Brown continues to get better, that yes, this is a 60-ish win team again.
Peyton Watson pops, maybe. Like that's another way.
I'm not going to predict it. And it's you lost your fifth starter, who was probably your fourth best player last year. He was better than Michael Porter Jr. for most of the season. And offensively, he gives you more than Aaron Gordon. This is still an incredibly talented team. I still very much like Christian Braun and Peyton Watson. What we saw from Christian Braun against the Minnesota series, and look, to the Nuggets' credit, and we mentioned this leading into the series, that we thought Brown might be a better defensive option against the Wolves than KCP. That came to bear out. And so that can make you higher on Christian Braun. I just worry they're putting too much, not necessarily on Nikola Jokic. Well, they're putting too much on Nikola Jokic to just lift up. Maybe I said they didn't act like he was the best player in the world. They kind of did and just said, no, Jokic will figure it out.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't matter who we put around
him. Positive player. I think that what they did is increase the gap between the Jokic and non-Jokic minutes. And that to me is a problem. Like for me, it gets harder for them to build units without Jokic. So we're talking in the regular season specifically, what, 13 to 17 minutes a game, whatever it ends up being. It gets harder for me to envision them fielding lineups that are going to be net positives. And I know people think this might be the team that utilizes Russell Westbrook properly. Part of the appeal of that happening is probably him playing with Nikola Jokic. And I don't know how to feel about the bench because I'm assuming Christian Braun is going to start. And so let's say that happens. Now all of a sudden you have Saric and Westbrook and Peyton Watson playing in the same units. If Michael Malone doesn't change his rotation patterns, that's a little bit of a red flag for me because now you're dealing with, okay, Saric can stretch the floor, but he's not a caps lock shooter. And none of their backup big except for Zeke Naji, who they, do we even count him like as part of the equation?
So still exists. We know that.
But like when you had Reggie Jackson as your backup point guard, at least that was someone who in theory could shoot. And it's now like, does the floor shrink too much there? And do we game this and say, well, should we be starting Peyton Watson just because we know that Nikola Jokic will be able to better, like the offense will still mostly be fine? There's just so many questions here. And I want to make it clear, they are still in my inner circle of title contenders. I just don't feel as confident as I felt in them the past 2 years when they were my title pick in each of the past 2 preseasons. They will probably not be my title pick this preseason. And what I can't wrap my head around is even if you wanted to prioritize development, you could have done that and still kept KCP. And then I think that would have left open the, like after what Christian Braun did and like having Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther healthy, I might have been, yeah, maybe they're just better. And I think they've leaned too far into this. We're going to bet on internal development for me. And for them to do that, it's not just a trust in Nikola Jokic. You need to trust that Jamal Murray is actually a max player who can carry lineups on his own. And when you look at how many of his minutes come alongside Nikola Jokic, it's not even a matter of the minutes without Nikola Jokic are bad, which they are. It's that Michael Malone clearly doesn't trust him at the level you would of a typical second max player who's also considered your second best playmaker. To run, maybe that changes this year. I'm open to anything with this team. They're still uber talented, but 58 wins is a tall order. And so I just think defaulting to worse is the safer, smarter pick.
I think that's right. And I think it is important to distinguish between regular season success and like where they fall in the, the title odds or are not the actual odds, but like who we view as teams that could like, yeah, okay. Oh, Denver won the title. All right. Like not, it's not going to be like, no way, how'd they do it without KCP? It's a different thing. Like, and I would just ask you, like, is it too much of a talking head question to say, like, considering players on the team, maybe just I'm imputing it to everybody, but like, it's been said that they ran out of gas and that's why they lost.
Yeah.
Are you concerned that Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are playing in the Olympics? Like, or that they're playing over the summer after a title run and after a deep playoff run, and now there's less of a break? Like, I don't know if fatigue was a factor. Like, this ain't helping, right?
Great
like
point.
That's part of it. It feels a little like first takey, but it's not something you totally gloss over in this particular situation either. If you're talking about like maybe they rest guys a little more because they're wiped out from 2.5 years of busting their ass. Like that's a thing. Like that could absolutely, knock them down a win or two. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
I guess right? If you were to make the argument that they're a better team than they were last season, is the pathway just that both Christian Braun and Peyton, or I'll say 2 of Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, and Julian Strawther are just better than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was for, like, what is the actual, and I guess that would be a fair bet to make. I still find it, why would you let KCP walk? I'm struggling to figure out, like, what is the argument aside from just maybe there's injuries elsewhere that Nikola Jokic plays in all 82 games, wins another MVP award. And it's just, I don't like to actually argue, forget about wins for a second, to just argue that they're a better overall team than last year. I find myself struggling to, like, the outcome would have to be what I said, is that two of those young guys are better than KCP was for you last year.
I think we're thinking about it similarly. I would frame it as, the argument would be not necessarily that like Brown or Watson or Strother or whoever you want to choose is better than KCP. I think what the argument would be is, it actually doesn't matter who gets to play big minutes with Jokic.
Okay.
He'll find a way to like make the difference up somehow. So like Brown doesn't have to be better. It's that Jokic will just figure out how to use what he's good at. If you give him KCP's minutes, for long enough stretches, he'll just turn him into a different type of good player. But it's like, the bottom line will be, you could put some like 4 scarecrows around Jokic and he would figure it out. Like, that's, to me, it's really, you said it earlier, it's just a bet on him as much as anything. If you're saying they're going to be better,
because what's tough to
or as good.
I know losing Bruce Brown, they couldn't keep Bruce Brown. I'll make that clear. But this is the second offseason in which they lost a player where, even if you are looking at a potential replacement already on the roster, they don't check the same number of boxes. Where, okay, you had concerns about KCP's offense in the postseason. Just in a vacuum, he is more of the going to get up threes and give you really good defense than Julian Strother doesn't check both those boxes. Christian Brown right now doesn't check both those boxes. Peyton Watson doesn't check both those boxes. And so they're all different types of players. And now this is the second offseason in which that's happened to them. And so even if the development comes along, is the best version of Peyton Watson next season good enough offensively to offset that? Ditto for Christian Brown. Or is the best version of Julian Strother good enough defensively to offset that?
Yeah, it just puts more of a burden on Jokic. And like, look, if you, I don't know, it feels like ancient history now, but it's like, you're taking a really good defensive piece out of your most used lineups. I know Brown's great, like, and maybe Watson's great, but if it's Strother, just because you need shooting, you can't have Brown or Watson and Aaron Gordon. If Aaron Gordon's going to be shooting like he did last year, you got to have shooting. Then it's like, okay, there's a weaker defensive link, and now we're going to relitigate the Jokic can't anchor a good enough defense to win a title thing because you're just chipping away at like his support system. I don't know. Yeah. I'm open to the idea that like offensively the Nuggets will be awesome. Just it doesn't matter who's around Jokic. That's just not true on the other end necessarily. I do think he's improved a ton, but if you're looking for like where's the drop off happening, it's potentially that you're just going to be sacrificing something in lieu of KCP, right? Like, I don't know.
Do you think anyone other than Oklahoma City / Boston has usurped them in the championship conversation pecking order? I think the teams to note there would be Dallas, Minnesota, Philly, and New York, maybe Cleveland if it were Milwaukee. Like, I wouldn't guarantee any of those teams are just have better title equity than Denver.
No, I think that's right. So I think maybe what you're saying is you've got OKC and Boston. I think if we're doing tiers, which we're not yet, but like they kind of feel like
Denver in their tier, but behind both of them within that tier.
So it's like they have a case, and we're not going to argue about it, but they're technically ranked below.
They're an inner circle title contender, is just how I would frame it.
Yeah. I like them better as a title threat than. I mean, I guess, I don't know. They almost feel like they fit right between OKC, Boston, and then the other teams you listed. Like they're in a second tier of their own. Right,
with the Joel Embiid health stuff in Philly, the Knicks, just Julius Randle's postseason track record, and if you're second now, if you move him as your second best shot creator, Bridges, and then Minnesota. The bet on we talk about betting on youth. I mean, it didn't cost them any of their veterans, but like if Rob Dillingham's going to play this huge role into the postseason, so I think that's right. Is that they're probably sandwiched between Boston and OKC and then all those other teams that we mentioned.
And then to even thin slice it more, I do think that if I had to choose a tier, I would probably move Denver up into that top tier more likely than I would move them down among Minnesota, New York, Philly, whatever.
Minnesota and Dallas are tripping me up. And even Dallas, like Milwaukee, I'm kind of just sitting there like, they just had a Gary Trent Jr. and they were killing people with their top 4 players in the court last year, but Chris Middleton has two new ankles. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. So, but they do feel more at risk of not being what you just said, where they feel more at risk of being passed. Like once we start to play the games, I might look at it and say, whereas I probably wouldn't have envisioned it if they brought back KCP. I'm now more open to the idea of, well, if we start to see the games, like I could see Minnesota or Dallas or Phil, like I could see those teams like usurping them. I wouldn't, again, I'm not predicting it right now, but they do feel more, they certainly, I mean, objectively speaking, they are more vulnerable in the championship discussion than they were last year.
I think that has to be uncontroversial. Like maybe like Nuggets fans will say like, no, like somehow Brown and or Watson and or Strother and or Pickett and or just down the list are somehow better than KCP. I just like, I don't.
Where are Hunter Tyson stands at? Let's get that in the comment.
Who can say?
Are you ready to take us out? Your first pod back, Banner. I haven't edited it yet, and we had some technical fuck ups along the way on my end, but you came back to over 100-minute podcast, so you're in playoff form already after vacation, Grant.
And we had this was the first time we had lightning on a podcast that knocked out your internet. I mean,
shout out to my dogs though; they did bust in because they were scared, but they were just quiet. One of them actually just left when I was giving them a compliment. So
I wouldn't have known it. My doorbell rang. It feels like a little bit that the universe was conspiring to end this podcast, especially with acts of God like lightning storms.
But you know what? Sicko mode was activated, and so we persevered.
Couldn't do it. Yeah. Let's see. We don't have any force majeure clauses because there's no way for God or anyone to stop us from podcasting. Maybe that's the new tagline. God can't stop us. Not even God can stop us from
He's tried. He keeps failing. They tried. They keep failing.
Can't do it. All things are possible. Not that. Can't do it. Let's hammer this out live on air. Jared Allen just got paid again. Are we still apologizing to him? Do we apologize more or do we stop and pick somebody else? Because
we should just keep apologizing to him because they very clearly like, we'll sign you to this just so that we can still trade you this season. Probably. Apologies
on
to Jared Allen
because there was that questioned your toughness. Yeah. I apologize.
We did have though, while you were gone, a Cavs fan. I don't remember what they disagreed with that I was talking about. I couldn't remember, but they said, isn't this the same podcast that thought the Jared Allen contract was bad? And I did. You actually missed it while you were gone. I went months without responding to any negativity. A Kings fan ended up catching me at a bad moment, said that we didn't watch basketball, and I called him an asshole. I deleted it. I think they were kind of being an asshole, but I need to be above saying it. And then I responded to this yokel on Twitter, on YouTube. Well, I was like, we literally apologize to Jared Allen at every single podcast that Grant and I do together. So please, people are wrong, and they can walk it back, get out of here. And look, the one thing we got right is would having Jared Allen there maybe repress Evan Mobley's ceiling? Prove it hasn't.
Yep, seems like it. What's the hoped for response from someone that says you don't watch basketball? Do you like? Is it hope that like
honestly it's probably to irritate them, and I need
you got us. You're right.
I need to be not so much as a wimp and let it in. Like I shouldn't care what these random people on the internet think, but I tell you, the negative feedback loop, even when it's not creative or valid criticism, it just gets exhausting.
Sure,
but that's at the top is the world's best podcast, I guess.
Yeah. Find another one that God can't stop. All right. Well, I guess we'll leave them in. I think, we've gone down this road for so long. If you have not already, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies, comment on YouTube, help the algorithm love us. Check out the merch. It's brand new. We're both sporting it. I even have a hat behind me. If you can see it, I might wear it next time. It's too small to see. Check out the merch drop. Join our Discord. Links for all that stuff in the YouTube and podcast description. We close as always and forever. Oh, Dan's got a hat too.
Terrible. I should have branded it on the back because I only wear my hats backward.
So next time. Merch drop 3.0. Shouts to Frank Ntilikina and forever and always. New money. Apologies to Jared Allen.